All right, welcome in. I'm the Kodiak, and I am bringing you my Dynasty Superflex 2024 rookie mock draft, and kind of my rankings in a sense, but just where I would take guys, and where I would take them into builds and all that. But before I get into it, leave a like if you enjoy, subscribe if you're not already. Let's get right into it. So I know I talk about the real NFL on this channel a lot, but the way I actually started getting inspired to actually make YouTube videos was by watching other fantasy content creators, and this is still a huge hobby of mine. Despite the fact that I don't love it quite as much as I used to, I really like the fantasy football content landscape, and I love watching guys like Flock and Scott Connor and all that. So that was about how I got into YouTube, and yeah, so let's dive right into it. So Superflex, that means we are starting two quarterbacks. That means quarterbacks are very highly valued. They're pretty much gold in this format, and tight end premium. So here's what we're going to do with the first pick. With the first pick, it's got to be Caleb Williams. You can make an argument for Marvin Harrison Jr. if you are deep at the quarterback position, but even then, I would still probably try to go back to the 102. In a Superflex, this cannot be anybody other than Caleb Williams, in my opinion, just due to the fact that he is probably, in my opinion, the best quarterback prospect we've had since Burrow, and he's stepping into a situation with a really good offense, one of the best situations a number one pick has ever stepped into. Because when you're the first overall pick, you're usually going to a bad team. But the Bears already have weapons for him. They have three legit wide receivers for him. They have Kmet. They added Swift as well. And they definitely made some improvements to their O-line over the past few years. So I'm really excited about the Chicago landing spot with Williams. And even if you don't think he's all that, even if you don't think you can win a Super Bowl, even if you're, concerned about all the stuff that came out, like, oh, him painting his nails, him just being a bit of a diva. I won't deny that he's a bit of an oddball, but at the same time, even if he's bad in real life, he's going to score fantasy points. So 102, this is also a tier of its own. This is none other than Marvin Harrison Jr. He's going to be tied to Kyler Murray. They desperately needed a wide receiver one after losing Hollywood Brown to the Kansas City Chiefs this offseason. And this is a really nice build for where the Arizona Cardinals are headed. So yeah, I'm excited about this for Marvin Harrison. Carved from stone, day one, ready, startable wide receiver one for an NFL organization, and one of the best wide receiver prospects we've also had in a long time. So really excited about that there. Now the 103, this is where things get interesting, but I'm actually going to go with Malik Nabers. Not many guys got drafted to spots this year where they're going to step in and instantly be the number one target in an offense. And before I get into that, let me just say 103 through 107, it's all a giant tier. It's all according to preference. This is just what I would do. I do not view a huge difference between Malik Nabers and the guy I'm going to pick at the 107. So yeah. But with Malik Nabers, I don't think this fantasy trajectory is as cut and dry as we're making it out to be. Because yes, we love Malik Nabers, the talent. We are very much in on him. Instant producer in the SEC. Absolutely dominated there with Jaden Daniels. But at the same time, he's going to the Giants, and it's probably going to be a very annoying year, and if not multiple years, for Malik Nabers, to the point where he could be on a Drake London trajectory, and it's just really unfortunate to see what could come of that. But ultimately, he is somebody that I would take at the 103 by the talent and hope the situation figures itself out. Now, the 104, I'm going to go with Jaden Daniels here, and even if you don't think Jaden Daniels is going to be amazing for real life, what do we like quarterbacks to do in fantasy football? We like rushing quarterbacks, and he's going to have a long leash. He's the first pick of the Peters administration in Washington alongside Dan Quinn. So I'm really excited about this. He already has some form of legitimacy when it comes to the weapons. They've also tried to add guys like Luke McCaffrey and Ben Sinnott and a few others. So Jaden Daniels is somebody I would take there. Number 105. This could either be Odunze, May, or Bowers, and depending on format, it could go either way, but I'm just going to stick with Drake May just because QBs are gold in this format. Although I am excited about everybody, Drake May, he has a very good chance to hold value even if New England's not good. Now, one of the things that does scare me about Drake May is that we don't really know what this offense is going to look like. But at the same time, they have 4 or 5 viable wide receivers there. I know they have Kendrick Bourne and KJ Osborne, and yeah, I'm counting those as viable guys. but they added Jalen Polk, they added Javon Baker, and they have Pop Douglas already. So it's not the worst wide receiver core in the league anymore, at least, which is an improvement. But at the same time, why I'm excited about Drake May is because he can use his wheels as a legit weapon. And this team probably is going to have a bad defense in going into 2024. Like, yes, Belichick did not do a great job of surrounding this team with long-term talent. But, he was able to get a lot out of them, and we don't know what Mayo's defense is going to look like either. And just based on talent alone, I'm not really sold with what I'm seeing on that side of the ball from New England. So, Drake May, I'm expecting the Patriots to be involved in more shootouts, if anything, which feels weird to say, but yeah. And even if he's bad year one, I still think he has a pretty good chance to hold value because he's a very, very good quarterback prospect in his own right. Very toolsy, very gifted. I'm excited about him at the 105. 106, we're going to go with Rome Odunze. And when you're taking a guy like Rome Odunze, you just got to realize one thing. He very easily has the ceiling to be a bona fide dynasty wide receiver 1 and get into the elite tier. I'm not sure about how high we can go for Rome Odunze, but we've got Caleb Williams to Rome Odunze. That's like a diet version of Chase to Burrow. And Rome Odunze is one of the most complete receivers we've had to come out of college over the past few years. So I'm expecting him to be a day one impact receiver. Now, is he going to go completely ham year one, like, putting up 16, 17 points a game? I don't think so, because they still have Keenan Allen there, they still have DJ Moore, and they have a lot of just mouths to feed in that offense in general, especially adding into the fact that Caleb Williams is a mobile quarterback, so he's definitely going to use his legs as well. But at the same time, Keenan Allen is probably not going to be on this team next year. So I'm really excited about Rome Odunze and what he can bring to the Chicago Bears. 107. I'm going Brock Bowers here. Now, full disclaimer, if you are in either a 2 tight end league or let's say you're in a 1 tight end, like maybe 2 point per catch for tight ends league, I would take Bowers at the 103. I actually did take Bowers at the 103 in one of my other leagues, but what it boils down to, why people are kind of soured on him now, not really soured, but this just wasn't a great landing spot. They don't really have a long-term quarterback in Vegas. At the same time, there's not really a ton of long-term viable target competition. Like, the only player that I think he's actually going to have to legit beat out for targets is Jacoby Myers. He is going to a room that already has Michael Mayo, so that's kind of unfortunate. At the same time, Bowers is a better player than Mayer was, so Raiders kind of went BPA with their approach. First draft pick of the Pierce and Telesco era, and I'd probably have Brock Bowers as my dynasty tight end 5, rather than if he just went to the Chargers, and, I was probably going to put him as my dynasty tight end 2, but that's completely okay. And if you are needy of a tight end, I am completely fine with you taking him over any of these guys besides Caleb Williams and Marvin Harrison Jr. My next pick is, this one's going to surprise some people, but it's Xavier Worthy. I know that people usually go for Brian Thomas or J.J. McCarthy, and that's completely fine. Like I said, this is kind of a pick your flavor sort of thing. I just trust the Chiefs to be a more high-volume passing offense rather than the Jaguars or the Vikings when it comes to, Xavier Worthy's value as opposed to Thomas or McCarthy. But Xavier Worthy had great production. Obviously, we all know about the 40-yard dash, and he can play legit wide receiver. This is a landing spot for wide receivers that a lot of people have soured on, but the upside, in my opinion, is just way too good to pass up. If you were taking a guy who landed on Jacksonville, Trevor Lawrence, granted, Brian Thomas, nothing to take away from him. He is a great player. You are going to be kicking yourself. You're going to be like, oh my God, this is so obvious. How did I not see this coming? So if you do pass on Xavier Worthy, you just got to ask yourself if you are going to be fine if he ends up becoming, what we think he can. And there are a lot of people who can, because before Rashee Rice, this was a landing spot that a lot of people had soured on for the wide receiver position. But I think Rashee Rice being a bad prospect and still finding a way to produce and still finding a way to become a good player in the NFL has eased a lot of those concerns. Next one is Brian Thomas Jr. And I would say right now that Brian Thomas Jr. is better than Christian Kirk and he's better than Gabe Davis. Now, I don't know if he's going to step in immediately and earn targets over those guys, especially when they have some mouths to feed other than their wide receivers like Ingram and ETN. And I don't know if Trevor Lawrence is going to be good enough to support a bunch of viable fantasy weapons, but BTJ, the talent, is just so special. Instant producer at LSU, played alongside Malik Neighbors and Jane Daniels. Absolute baller. I absolutely love this player. So yeah, you can't really go wrong with him. He was the 4th wide receiver off the board for a very good reason. The NFL should tell you that he's good via capital. So yeah. Number 10. This is where we are going to go with JJ McCarthy. Now, even if I'm not a huge JJ McCarthy fan, I have to admit he is probably still going to be good in fantasy football because I don't see him becoming the high volume passer that Cousins became when he was playing in this Kevin O'Connell offense, when he was playing in Minnesota that went through, all of these crazy fantasy years. But Cousins legitimately has been a top 10 quarterback over the past few years, in my opinion, in the NFL. Granted, say what you want about his primetime games, but JJ McCarthy is now stepping into an offense that has Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson once he comes back from his ACL. So this is definitely an offense I want to be investing into, especially because it's going to be a high-scoring one. It should be, at least, assuming that Kevin O'Connell can get the most out of JJ McCarthy. So yeah, also has sneaky speed. I'm excited about a guy like JJ McCarthy. 111. I'm going to go with Ladd McConkey here. He's instantly tied to Justin Herbert. He's already the best wide receiver in that room, and there was no way that the Chargers were going into next year with Quentin Johnston and Josh Palmer as their plans at wide receiver 2 and wide receiver 1, respectively. So yeah, Ladd McConkey, he's a great separator. He's a great, true X receiver, and I could see him being deployed in a lot of interesting ways in a Harbaugh offense. He's playing with Justin Herbert, and Herbert is, yes, he has a propensity to get the ball to his number 1 receiver a lot of the time, and there's nobody on this roster that's even close to Ladd McConkey. One of the hesitations that people may have with McConkey is that it remains to be seen how Harbaugh actually deploys his offensive weapons, and if he just wants to run the ball all day, every day like he did at Michigan when he had Corbin Edwards, but I don't know. We'll see about that. So, number 12. Who are we going to go with? We're going to go with Keon Coleman. There's a lot of instant opportunity here in Buffalo, but why I have Coleman ranked below these other guys, even if I think Josh Allen is a better quarterback than Justin Herbert and a better quarterback than Brian Thomas, and the Bills could very well be a high-volume passing team, is because look what happened to Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis after Joe Brady took over last year. It was not good. Granted, I don't think either of those two are quite the players that we thought they were, and Stephon Diggs in particular, I think, has definitely taken a step backwards in his NFL career, and I think there's a non-zero chance that he's kind of cooked. But Keon Coleman is somebody I'm still excited about, despite the fact that there are a lot of concerns about him, despite the fact that the production really wasn't there in college. This is sort of one of those things where you kind of have to trust the landing spot, you have to trust the capital, you have to trust the film grades, and the fact that a lot of people do like him and what he does bring to the Buffalo Bills offense. So yeah, Keon Coleman is my 112. Now we're getting into a range that's pretty interesting, but my favorite pick here is Ricky Pearsall. Got drafted in the first round to the San Francisco 49ers, and you can say whatever you want about the Kyle Shanahan, record of developing skill position players drafted, round 3 and beyond. But at the same time, when it came to Ayuk and when it came to Debo and when it comes to Pearsall now, I assume he definitely knows what he's doing. And this is an offense that you want to be investing heavily into. This is a team that's going to be good. This is a team that's going to be in a lot of shootouts. So I'm really high on Ricky Pearsall. Now, if, full disclosure, Debo or Ayuk could be traded this offseason, and at that point, Ricky Pearsall, he has to be behind Xavier Worthy for me as the 109, because that opportunity, that instant opportunity for him is just too good to pass up. The reason he's behind Worthy, Thomas, McConkey, and Coleman for me right now is because San Francisco is going to have a lot of mouths to feed, at least for year 1 and maybe even year 2 of his career. And he is an older prospect, which, I know there's a lot of data tracking that suggests that older prospects who, don't come into the NFL when they're immediately eligible are worse bets to succeed. But at the same time, this is something where I just have to, once again, trust the landing spot, trust the capital. Excuse me. So let's go here. 202. This one's going to be a bit of a surprise. I'm going to go with Bo Nix. He's in an offensive ecosystem where everybody hates the weapons, and there could be a very good chance that Sean Payton tries to establish the run, and you don't really know what is going to come of Bo Nix, and you don't really know what is going to go on with these weapons. But apparently he was Sean Payton's guy, and when Sean Payton asked his analytics team to remove, all the, screens from Oregon's plays and playbook and play data last year, Bo Nix graded very highly. He graded very well. Sean Payton definitely likes this kid. He spoke very highly of him. I know that all GMs do, but he gave examples like Bo Nix. They sent him an offensive install at 5 p.m. and then at 9 a.m. the next day when he was meeting with the team, he did a great job. So I'm definitely high on Bo Nix, especially because he does have legit scrambling ability. 203. This is kind of up in the air for me right now. Didn't really think about this before I hopped on and started recording, but I'm just going to go with what I've seen from a lot of mock drafts, and I'm thinking about Jonathan Brooks here. Ultimately, that's what I will do. So, Jonathan Brooks is the only verified guy who got drafted this year who steps into a role where he immediately is the best running back on the team, because his only competition is the ghost of Chuba Hubbard and Miles Sanders, both of whom we can say are pretty much Jags at this point. And they're usable bodies to NFL teams, but they're not really exciting. And what Jonathan Brooks offers to Carolina is very exciting. He doesn't have that much tread on his tires. I believe he did not carry the ball that much in college because he had Bijan and Roshan ahead of him. But at the same time, he's going to an offense where they used Rachaad White a lot last year. They used him heavily. At least Dave Canales did. Their Tampa Bay's offensive coordinator from last year, who ended up going to the Carolina Panthers. So, yeah, I don't know. We'll see what happens there, but I'm really high on the Jonathan Brooks thing. Wide receiver. So this is kind of getting interesting to me, and there's one guy I really, really want here, but it might be a little too early, but I don't know. I'm going to deviate from consensus a little bit, and I'm going to take Jermaine Burton. Now, here's why I'm going to do this. He fell in the draft due to some off-the-field issues. He fell in the draft due to some, character concerns and everything like that. But here, let me draft him so I can keep talking. He fell in the draft due to some character concerns, but the Bengals, this is a team that definitely knows how to evaluate wide receiver talent. And he has an instant path to relevance, especially when the Bengals do move on from T. Higgins, assuming that they will, because T. Higgins released another trade request a week ago. So yeah, he has an instant path to relevance. I'm just excited to see what he does as a member of the Cincinnati Bengals. This is a little tough for me now because I'm not really a fan on taking running backs here who I think are at least not poised to go ham immediately, because we have Blake Corum, we have Trey Benson, and we have, Jonathan Brooks already off the board. We do have Lloyd too, who will come in year one and be the backup to Josh Jacobs, but let's see. 205, probably going to go with Michael Penix. And this is something where you have to look at your team build, you have to look at your construction, and you have to be like, okay, am I fine holding Penix for 2 years? And if you don't like, anything to do with any of these other prospects, then yeah, maybe you take a flyer on Penix, because that's essentially punting and assuming that this team will be able to figure out in 2 years and they will get Penix on the field. But the thing that separates Nix and Penix for me is that Nix may genuinely play 34 games in the NFL before Penix gets on the field once. So that's why I kind of have Nix over Penix. Even if you don't buy the talent, you do kind of have to factor that in. Atlanta is a team where I want whichever quarterback they are going to be drafting, just due to the fact that they have weapons like London, they have Pitts, both of whom are very, very good and very solid players. actually great players. What am I even saying? Alongside Bijan Robinson, all are great weapons in the passing game. So yeah, you definitely want any quarterback that's tied to a good offense and has a lot of weapons around them. So yeah, I'm completely fine with the Penix pick here. Now, I'm pretty much only going to be tapping wide receiver from here on out. But the real question is, who do I go with? And based on probabilities and statistics, we just have to go, 1 through 40 is your best bet to succeed. And there's actually one wide receiver who got drafted 1 through 40 that I want zero part of that we're going to talk about later. But Jalen Polk is where I am going with the 206, just due to the fact that he got very good capital on a team that's trying to rebuild their wide receiver core. So we're trying to help out their young quarterback by dipping on a guy like Polk. And he was very good at Washington. He was actually kind of a stud. So, the NFL capital tells us that he's very good. And yeah, there you go. Texas Tech transferred to Washington, 1,200 yards last year. I really like what I've seen from Polk. He's definitely a good route runner as well. So that'll hopefully get him on the field as soon as possible. So I'm going to talk about all these picks that I'm going to make almost in rapid succession. I don't want much of A.D. Mitchell because he's absolutely buried. But this is just kind of a situation where you're just like, okay, he's just BPA. You just got to go with, who you really like. He has a crazy high ceiling, and I really like what he brings to the Indianapolis offense. But unfortunately, he's 5th in the pecking order behind 1, Michael Pittman, 2, probably AR's rushing ability, probably 3, JT's rushing ability, and probably 4, Josh Downs being in the slot. So yeah, number 208. We're going to go with Ben Sinnott here. And I've seen a lot of comps to him where he is pretty much a poor man's Laporta. And the only real tight ends I'm interested in drafting here this year are Bowers and Sinnott. Because I just respect their capital. And even with a guy like JT Sanders and Theo Johnson and Cade Stover, yeah, those guys were nice names during this past college football season. But look at any round 3 through 7 tight end range that we've had in recent years. It's not pretty. So yeah, that's why I'm going to go with Sinnott there, especially if you play in a tight end premium format. This one is interesting to me. The only guy who I would not hate here at wide receiver is there's 2. It's either Tez Walker or Malachi Corley. But we are going to take a running back. We're just going to go with the better proven offense. We're going to go with Blake Corum. And Blake Corum is very Kyren Williams-esque. And if Kyren does go down, I could see Corum putting up multiple RB1 finishes. So yeah, this is definitely a piece of an offense where I'm just going to be like, okay, yeah, I want Blake Corum on the Rams. I want him with Sean McVay. Even if Kyren Williams is ahead of him, Kyren Williams, in my opinion, was just a guy who happened to earn the trust of a coaching staff because they had nobody behind him last year besides Zach Evans, I know there were a few other guys sprinkled in like Ronnie Rivers and Darrell Henderson, but Ronnie Rivers was their backup last year. And there are legitimately wide receivers who got cut in the middle of the year last year who are better than Ronnie Rivers. So yeah, this is one that I'm not too excited about. You kind of got to respect the capital here. And this is a player that I'm going to end up with 0 shares of. But at the same time, this is only if I could not trade out of the pick and I had to make the pick. Xavier Legette. This is Jonathan Mingo 2.0. I do not trust the Panthers to evaluate wide receiver talent. They said last year that they were going to stop putting premier assets into the wide receiver position. This was after the first round last year. So this was, I believe, Tepper and Reich's round 1 press conference last year. And what do? They've now bet on Legette and Mingo, 2 very suboptimal profiles. Not really great bets to succeed analytically. Legette, yeah, he fits in culturally. I know there have been a lot of, funny things about his accent all over TikTok and Instagram and Twitter. I don't care about none of that. I don't want any Xavier Legette. But just based on capital alone, he's somebody that I'm taking 210, and I'm pretty sure he's better than Mingo. But at the same time, that doesn't really matter to me. Dave Canales will hopefully figure out a way to use him and deploy him a lot better than they figured out how to use Mingo last year. Now, at the running back position, I'm going to go with Trey Benson here. Kyler gets a sidekick in Trey Benson. I know he already got a sidekick at wide receiver with Marvin Harrison Jr., but Trey Benson, very explosive player. Really excited to see what he can do in the Arizona offense. There's not a lot of competition. I mean, I know they have James Conner, but he was left over from the previous regime. I know that they added guys like Michael Carter, and they also have guys like Amari DiMercato, but this should be Trey Benson's backfield going forward. And I'm really, really in love with what he brings to the table as a member of the Arizona Cardinals. So yeah. And last one I'm really going to touch on is Malachi Corley, just due to the fact that the Jets are very thin at wide receiver besides Garrett Wilson. Mike Williams, as terrible as it is to say, you kind of have to factor him missing at least, at minimum, half the season, which isn't good. Definitely something I would be hesitant about if I was a Jets fan, but either way, he was a pretty good player. Now he's going to an offense with Aaron Rodgers, and I'm not confident in the Jets' skill positions and anything like that outside of Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson because they're coached by Nathaniel Hackett, Todd Downing, and Carter from Tennessee, all three of whom had big hands in coaching the worst offenses in the league. But Malachi Corley, he could be a good player. He could be actually a very good player, and I think there's a very instant path for him to being a number 2 where there is pretty much no one behind him. If Garrett Wilson misses a game or two, then I don't know, it'll be wheels up. So just based on landing spot, this is pretty much where I have everybody. Other guys I would take here, I mean, I like Troy Franklin, but he's not really a consideration, at least until the late 3rd round, in my opinion. Roman Wilson, he's a good pure slot, but I don't know, kind of a limited ceiling there in Pittsburgh. The good thing about Pittsburgh is that Pickens is not like a 10-targeted game guy or anything like that. But I don't know. Tez Walker, this one's really interesting to me. It just feels like De'Ami Brown all over again, but there's one quarterback you'd want to play with if you are De'Ami Brown all over again. It is the Baltimore Ravens. So this is someone I'm going to take in best ball. And yeah, so these are pretty much the guys I'm talking about. Other running back flyers I like are Estime. As a Broncos fan, I do believe he's the best running back we have in our room, especially since Javonte blew up his Achilles, or no, his ACL 2 years ago and still hasn't fully recovered. Irving behind Rachaad White. It's literally the Spider-Man pointing meme, and if Rachaad White misses time, Bucky Irving seems like a nice plug-and-play. Same with Shipley in the Eagles, even though he's not going to be what Saquon Barkley is. He's just, I don't know, I'm really excited about him. So yeah, that kind of does it in what I would do with all my rookie draft picks. From what you do from here on out, I do not care. But this is just what I would do. This is what I would do if I was attacking a draft. So yeah, I'll see you guys next time. Peace.